Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FBC Radio Live. It's Monday. It's September the 18th, 2023. And, well, most of week 2 is in the books. We got 2 games tonight. Nice little doubleheader for us, to close out the week. We didn't get it last week, John. And for a reason, I'm sure the NFL would admit, but hey, you had to give Aaron Rodgers and the Jets attention. And look, I understand, at the outcry, catering to Aaron Rodgers, but I will cut them some slack because it was also obviously the anniversary of 9/11. So, to give New York center stage, I'm okay with. But nonetheless, we are getting our traditional kickoff this season doubleheader on Monday Night Football. And John, quite frankly, I've been saying this for a while. I'd much rather have 2 games on Monday night and just get rid of Thursday night altogether.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, obviously. Now, if you work that out, one game would be ESPN, one game would be Prime. So I think they both would want maybe some money back on their deals because they don't have exclusivity that particular night. So unless maybe you have a doubleheader on ESPN one week and Prime has a doubleheader the next week, whatever they need to do to work it out. Because Thursday nights are just not productive. They're really not.
You keep saying Prime, and all I'm thinking about is Deion Sanders. So it took me a second. I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Oh, Amazon Prime, right? All right. The second tier Prime. Let's put it that way.
I'd rather watch Colorado on Thursday night than just about any NFL team.
It's pretty exciting. John. You know what? No, actually, you know what? I'm gonna save this for we're gonna do an overreactions later, and I'll save this for that. I'll save this little nugget because it might be a little spicier. Maybe I'll forget by then, and that might save my reputation a little bit. Okay, thank you.
And also, when we do overreactions, it can be overreactions that we agree with.
Of course. I mean, we don't necessarily have to when we do our overreactions. Of course, it's whether sometimes we are creating this statement. Sometimes it's it might be something I see on Twitter that I might bring up. There's one that I might bring up today that I saw on Twitter that is fairly interesting. So yeah, it's we don't necessarily what do they say on Twitter or X or whatever. Retweets don't necessarily mean endorsements. That's kind of what we're going for here when we bring up some of these overreactions. But before, a little nugget close to home for me. My physical home, not like where I grew up in sentimentality. But this morning, John, it is being reported that the Tampa Bay Rays and the city of St. Pete have worked out a deal to build a new stadium here. And look, I know it's not a big deal to a lot of people, not necessarily even a big deal to me, but it's certainly something that's been really a underlying baseball headline since really 2016, I think it was when the city first gave the Rays permission to seek a different home. So since then, we've seen some ridiculous theories and suggestions, including splitting home games in Montreal. That would have been foolish and a disaster by Major League Baseball. But I think it's kind of cool that they're sticking around here. And look, the Royal Rumble is coming to St. Pete in January, and I'm about 10 minutes away from that stadium, so I'm pretty thrilled with that. So if a new stadium in downtown St. Pete invites more events outside of just baseball, sign me up. I'm good with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the Rays since 2008 have been a really productive baseball team. They've gone to the World Series twice, lost both times. They don't spend a ton of money, obviously, on free agents or on major trades, but they draft, develop all of their players for the most part. And look, they're going to the playoffs again this year. They were in the World Series in 2020. They need a new stadium. I mean, from what I understand, and I haven't been there, but I'm sure you have, it's not the most appealing place to go watch a baseball game. So if you can build something that's going to draw 25, 30, 32,000 fans per night, then you're going to be able to bring in more money to the organization and continue contending and maybe spend a little money to bring in a free agent. Because from what we understand is that place and the Oakland Coliseum, or whatever they call it now, are the 2 biggest eyesores in all of Major League Baseball. So obviously Oakland going to Vegas, and if the Rays can build a new stadium, good for them.
I'll say this. it's not great, but much like Dan Marino's post-career reputation, the hate towards the Trop is quite exaggerated, I think, and has kind of taken on a life of its own. So yeah, it's just look, it definitely needs to be redone. It's not like look, I mean, nostalgia-wise, Fenway, but let's face it, John, it's kind of a rundown old stadium because, well, it's a rundown old stadium, John, and so many renovations can only improve it so much. And I understand, like, I mean, it's a great historical stadium, everything like that, but at the end of the day, it's just look, you can't have. Here's the thing, John, you can't have an open air stadium here for baseball. You just can't. I mean, because the headache that would be caused by the delays and the issues, I would imagine would be, you know, more than they'd want to deal with because, well, during the summer it rains a lot, especially in the middle of the afternoon when you're trying to play baseball games. So I don't know. Just like I said, little nugget. I figured I'd throw out there because I guess again, it's literally close to home, not close to home in the sense that it's near and dear to my heart. It's just something interesting and it's sport related. So, anyways, a couple little headlines from Sunday. Sorry, my notes are all kind of screwed up here, John. I'm a little ill prepared today. Oh yeah, Dallas Cowboys yesterday. They became the fifth team in Super Bowl era to score at least 70 points and allow 10 or fewer points through their first two games this season. This team seems like they may be for real, and I've been harsh on Dak. Yeah, and deservedly so. I think again, you have as many turnovers as you did last year. You deserve some criticism in that regard. But they've been really good through the first 2 weeks, and save for San Francisco, it's getting harder and harder to deny how good this Cowboys team is.
Yeah, I think they have the best defense in football. They have the best defensive player in football, and
They might have the best player in football.
Absolutely. I mean, he's unblockable, and he's going to be part of my overreaction Monday a little bit later when we get to that. But yeah, what Dak Prescott has to do is make sure he takes care of the football, doesn't have to try to win the games on his own because that defense is not going to give up many points. Now, again, they didn't exactly face two elite offenses in weeks 1 and 2. I mean, the Giants were a disaster in week 1, although they had a nice comeback win yesterday against Arizona.
And you can thank me for that, by the way.
Yes.
I am complete.
I give you credit.
Well, if you remember, if you saw it on Twitter, I in somewhat of a kind of humorous attempt at humor, I posted a poll and asked whether or not the Giants would score a point this season. They immediately began their comeback not too long after I posted that poll. So in a way, like I said, I am directly responsible for their comeback win. So you're welcome, Giants fans.
I'll go along with that. That makes all the sense in the world. Absolutely. But now, obviously, we'll see what Dallas does going forward when they face the Eagles a couple times, when they face the 49ers later in the season, when they go up against really good offense.
October 8th.
We'll get a better idea, how good that defense is. But yeah, Dak doesn't have to win games on his own. That offensive line looks like it's back intact right now. They can run the football. They've got some nice weapons. CD Lamb had a huge game yesterday against the Jets. So yeah, they look really, really good. That's the team I picked to win the NFC. Unfortunately, I picked Cincinnati to win the AFC. They don't look so good right now, but it's a long season.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a discussion for possibly later in the show. Cincinnati. Well, I don't know if he's your guy, but he's certainly the guy who replaced your guy, Jordan Love, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Again, look, they lost. That was a a very disappointing loss, devastating loss for Green Bay, who looked like they were going to move to 2-0. But Jordan Love, so far, maybe they're a little bit better off right now. Well, certainly because Aaron Rodgers is obviously not playing, but it looks like early on the returns are pretty good on Jordan Love, and he's looked pretty good in the process and 3 career starts, obviously 2 coming this season.
Yeah, he looks very comfortable in the offense. I mean, he's been an understudy of Aaron Rodgers for 3 years. Like Rodgers was an understudy to Brett Favre. They've got him coached up. They've got him comfortable. And again, he's been missing some weapons. Christian Watson has missed the first 2 games. You get him back, that's going to be his top wide receiver. The offensive line is still good. It's just the defense faltered down the stretch yesterday, which is oftentimes been the case with the Packers. I think their defensive talent is better than their production. Maybe that just goes back to coaching at that point. But yeah, I mean, I think the Packers are going to contend in that division, and they made the right decision. They had to move on from Aaron Rodgers at some point. They're going to end up getting a second-round pick next year because Rodgers played 4 snaps this year. So instead of a first-round pick, they'll get a second-round pick, which is still valuable. And if the Jets, are 6-11, that could be like a top 40 pick. And they appear to have their quarterback of the future.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, if that's the case, you can look at Green Bay as being a pretty good organization when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. But if, like I said on I think last week, if that's the case, then expect one title and just kind of coast on that for a while. But hey, consistent quarterback play, right, John? Patriots are wishing they still had Brady. Oh, look, I take that back, obviously, because last night's game, obviously, between the Dolphins and the Patriots, I think Mac Jones was probably the least worrisome or concerning thing about the Patriots. I actually liked a lot of what he did. But John, and I said this before we got on the air, it's the same thing every week, it seems like, with the Patriots. They show flashes of, okay, this is what they can do to win, but their mistakes are so crippling. Like, I don't think a team, and you said, I'll give you credit for once, John. You said this pretty well off the air. You said they just don't recover well from it. So it makes these mistakes even more just devastating. So it's like you start moving the ball in offense, and Joel says, it brings up a great point. The offensive line was certainly a bad. They weren't great last night. I mean, obviously dealing with this shuffling line. First week it was the guards. This week it was the tackles. They put these drives together and they end in fumble. It goes all the way back to Cam Newton and the Patriots versus the Seahawks, where it was like that game looked like it was a turning point for that season and a devastating fumble at the goal line, and it just feels like it's been the same story ever since in various different fashions. Sometimes it's a fumble, sometimes it's an interception, sometimes it's a lateral back to the opposing defender in a very water boy find 52 moment, if you remember that one. So it's hard to, man, it's hard to really pinpoint what this Patriots team is, because it's like I said, I at times I think they have the best defense, or one of the best defenses in the league, and at moments last night they gave me no reason not to believe that, because relative to who they were facing, I think they did a pretty good job at doing what they were supposed to do. But eventually the Dolphins figured things out and the Patriots didn't adjust. And that was always the, marquee, characteristic of a Belichick Patriots defense. And I'm not piling on Belichick. I mean, anyone who expects the same amount of success. See, here's the thing, John, and I said this at the time. You're losing the greatest quarterback of all time. Nothing is going to be the same. Okay. Like, you would have to get another top 5 quarterback of all time come through your system to emulate the type of success and the things that you did. All this is doing to me, John, is showing me and kind of putting on display some of the little subtle differences. And I'm not saying that like the Tom Brady's presence alone causes them not to make mistakes. But John, it's not a coincidence that this team over the last 3 years or so have become incredibly undisciplined. And undisciplined in terms of pre-snap. Remember last year, pre-snap penalties and issues on the line and just confusion and clock management. I dare I say that not only Brady's control of the offense, but just his presence alone, his preparation, and what the type of impact he had on his teammates buttoned up a lot of these issues. I mean, coaching can only do so much, John. It's about the players on the field. So this isn't a knock on Belichick. This is just facing reality that you can have the best coach in the world, but if the players don't execute, and primarily you don't have an all world, greatest quarterback of all time type of quarterback to mask some of those errors, you're not going to win a whole hell of a lot in the NFL. So
he's 80-92 without Tom Brady as the starting quarterback. So obviously, I think his legacy has taken a hit the last 3 years. It had to. I mean, there's no question the guy's one of the greatest coaches ever, without question. But it's not to the point where like he's head and shoulders above legendary coaches like Paul Brown or Vince Lombardi or Joe Gibbs or Shula, the rest of them that are considered elite coaches, Bill Parcells, what have you. But when you look at the Patriots offensively, like I said, they just can't recover from mistakes. There's penalties, there's sacks, there's turnovers. It's just like one bad thing happened in a series and they just can't make up from it, right? Like you saw the Chiefs yesterday, and again, to compare them to the Chiefs is unfair. That's still the reigning Super Bowl champs, but the Chiefs had 3 turnovers in the first half, but their defense kept them in the game. And then finally, when the Chiefs got their offense right, they were able to take control of the game, because that's what the Patriots used to do. That's what the Patriots did for 19 years. How many games did we watch the Patriots play in? It ended with the Patriots winning, and you said, how did they do that? Well, they just made fewer mistakes than the other team, and they made more big plays thanks to the quarterback, and oftentimes thanks to the defense as well. That's what winning teams do. That's what the Chiefs are right now, and the Patriots aren't, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, every time there's a mistake, it gets magnified, right? Like how many times do we see, okay, it's 2nd and 10, here's a sack, now it's 3rd and 18. They're not capable of getting out of that.
That first drive kind of epitomizes everything. It's like you get started great. You're like, oh, awesome. Then all of a sudden a devastating loss of yardage. And then it's just downhill from there. It just snowballs.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, they don't have the playmakers, they don't have the quarterback that can make up for those mistakes. And again, the offensive line is a mess. And look, this is no surprise. We talked about it throughout the offseason. They had to address the offensive line. They really didn't. Now you hope that if you get Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, and Michael Onwenu all healthy playing together, do something with the right tackle position, that you can at least be competent from that position. But again, that's something that we're going to have to see over the next several weeks. And again, the next 2 teams they play have elite defenses, the Jets and the Cowboys. So good luck with that.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, things can change. 0-2, they've had some history starting 0-2 and having it turn out successful. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, with really good teams. Really good teams, right? With Tom Brady in 2001 and 1996 with a pretty loaded roster, they started 0-2 and got to the Super Bowl.
Well, and like I said, I mean, again, I think this is highlighting not so much. And Joel says, Belichick's defense has kept them at times in this game. So none of this is an obviously, his record's going to pale in comparison to what he had with Tom Brady. But of all those coaches you listed, only Joe Gibbs is a guy that you can say won without an elite quarterback. So to me, it's not. Yeah. So it's all kind of relative. It's like, and I've said this so many times, and this is not a Belichick knock. I just believe that players are ultimately, if push comes to shove, if you're going to have to make a decision, I think elite players, not just, number 53 on the roster type players. I'm talking elite players are more important than coaches. And let me narrow that down to maybe specifically quarterbacks because of their impact on the game. So again, that's why you're seeing the Patriots defense has been quote unquote top 10 the last 3 years, John. But for years, that's all I was being told that you needed to win. And the reality of it is you need obviously complementary defensive play, but you need elite quarterback play. So I think that's a nice little segue to get into our overreactions, because I think I got maybe it's not so much an overreaction, but maybe it's, I don't know, who knows. But anyways, week 2, we'll like we did in week 1, we gave a couple overreactions, and disclaimer, we don't necessarily believe these. It's just things we might have seen on Twitter, things we might have just thought of. I mean, there's many different reasons why we bring these up, but it's worth starting a discussion. So I will say this. My first overreaction is, and apparently someone really wants to get a hold of me, send them to voicemail and I will never listen to it. So My first overreaction is for the last couple of years we have talked about what a great state of quarterback play we're in. And I'm starting to think that maybe it's not necessarily as universally great as we thought. And I think it might be more of a product of what we're seeing from defenses across the board than this new wave of elite quarterbacking. Because I, to be honest, yeah, I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. But beyond that, John, like how many great quarterbacks do we really have? And I'm not talking about, oh, he's had one great season. I'm talking about sustained great. Like for a long time, we had obviously Brady, Manning. You can even throw Ben Roethlisberger because a lot of people remember his last couple of years, but for the majority of his career, he was an elite quarterback. And some of these other ones, even Eli Manning was winning a couple Super Bowls, but you had other quarterbacks that were making plays consistently and being elite consistently. We both are incredibly, or were. I don't know how it is now. We were incredibly high on Joe Burrow, and I understand he's dealing with another injury, but that's how many injuries now in 3 years? And
Yeah, his rookie
he's
year. Yeah, his
yeah,
rookie year, his knee got blown up. The appendectomy obviously is something non-football related, but yeah, I mean the calf strain got aggravated yesterday. And when I think of calf strains, I think of Achilles because that's exactly what
yeah.
happened with Aaron Rodgers, who had calf strains during OTAs, minicamp, and then we saw what happened last Monday night. So it's kind of scary. Yeah, I mean, I love Joe Burrow, but he's been, I would say, an elite quarterback for 2 years. I think you have to
Well,
be
well, well.
more
This
than
is what
that
I'm
going forward.
this is what I'm saying though. I think our idea of elite is all relative. Obviously, it's elite relative to
Mm-hmm.
the competition. I just don't think the competition's great. Like I look across the board and it's like okay, and this isn't a peeing contest between oh well this person played these X amount of players, but like when there was a time when uh the competition in the AFC wasn't necessarily what Baker Mayfield and Trevor. Look, Trevor Lawrence looks sometimes like he has all the talent in the world, but he's not an elite quarterback. I'm sorry. He just has not like shown flashes of eliteness. And you can say the same thing about a lot of these guys. Uh, Lamar Jackson looks like he had a solid, really nice game yesterday, and I picked him to win MVP this year. I hope he comes back to closer to that form because I think it'd be good for the sport. But the reality of it is, John, I look at Justin Herbert and I'm like, okay, he looks like a stat compiler. You know what I mean? He doesn't. To me, it's just like okay, another guy who throws fast and looks cool doing it, and like he's going to be the next guy to compete with this. And it's like okay, he discount Brett Favre right now. It seems like he's basically Brett Favre without the MVPs or the success, which is kind of a big thing. And I understand, okay, he's still young in his career, but John, we're talking about this era of quarterback play as like, oh, this is the new wave that it's so much better now. And I sit here and say like, we just left the golden era of quarterback play, and you can argue that the era prior to that was even the second best era of quarterback play because of the guys that were under center. Like I said, we had the privilege of watching, Brady, Manning, and again, his personality and outside issues aside, Brett Favre, for overlapping parts of both those eras, and then you throw in other guys like. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, he's still playing in the league, but you know what I'm saying, John. I feel like we convinced ourselves too quickly that we were in this great or new great era of quarterback play. And honestly, my overreaction is it's just kind of mediocre overall.
Well, I think defenses are catching up to offenses as well. I mean, you've got so many elite pass rushers. They're paid well, whether it's, TJ Watt or Nick Bosa, Aaron Donald. I mean, you've got the stud linemen that put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. They're unblockable. So it's made the position difficult in that sense, that I think quarterbacks can be under duress at some point. But it's also got to go back to sometimes coaching as well. Look, Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in football, no question, but he's been fortunate to be with Andy Reid. So now you look at someone like Justin Herbert. He's got Brandon Staley as his head coach, who I don't think may survive the season unless the Chargers start winning some games. Sean McDermott's a defensive coach in Buffalo's. He's the head coach of Josh Allen. Zach Taylor is Joe Burrow's head coach. Seems to be a good offensive mind, but who knows? I mean, so I think that they have to kind of grow together. And Trevor Lawrence is 23, so I think he's obviously, still got room to grow without question. But yeah, I think sometimes we pin it on them so quickly, like, wow, look at this guy putting up incredible numbers as a rookie, like Justin Herbert did, or whatever.
It's the numbers.
It's like you've got to now look at it and say, well, it's a great time to be a quarterback in terms of the passing numbers. And also, you got to sustain this for a period of time because now defenses start to figure out how to attack you, whether it's Herbert or Burrow or whoever. So now they have to make those adjustments the way that the Bradys and Mannings, Rodgers, and all those great quarterbacks were able to do from year in and year out. So that's a work in progress. I mean, these guys obviously have talent. There's no question about that. But can they be as productive as that talent is? We're going to have to find out. And a lot of it does have to do with coaching, consistency, and all of that.
No, and like I just think the more I think about it, I mean, everything's geared for quarterbacks to have success, and it's like, and I feel like I'm piling on Joe Burrow because I'm taking it personal because obviously like you said we kind of look alike, but for the most part it's because I've really been on a Joe Burrow hype thing, but it's like imagine if Tom Brady spent 3-4 years now with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, and that offensive staff when he was playing, early on. And it's not fair to compare anyone to Tom Brady, but that's what I mean by elite. Like Peyton Manning. I mean, he had that offensive talent around him, and look, maybe they didn't win his first couple of years, but it wasn't because of him. You weren't getting any sort of 82-yard duds out of him. You know what I mean? Like there's times where it's like you sit there and you're like, Joe, what are you doing? Like how are you? And again, that's partly because we've anointed a lot of these guys elite before their time. So as soon as you call them elite, that expectation rises. So there's little margin for error. Hence why, like when people get upset when you start nitpicking things about a player's historical career when they're trying to compare it to one of the all-time greats, well, you're raising the bar, so yeah, you're going to get nitpicked. So anyways, maybe that's something we can monitor throughout the season. I just, like I said, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit bitter. Maybe I'm a bitter old person now. That's something I'm trying to accept and get over. But the reality of it is I think we overhype a lot of these players, and I think we've at times tried to convince ourselves that we're in this better era of quarterback play. And I think it's a lot of a product of just how the game has been officiated and geared towards the offense now. So we spent a lot of time on that one overreaction. So what's your first one from this past week or just in general?
Well, let me overreact to the point where I know Micah Parsons blew up that game yesterday for the Dallas Cowboys against the New York Jets. And some people on Twitter and just kind of going through my mind thinking that this might be the closest thing we've seen to Lawrence Taylor. And you know what? I'm buying it. I think that we've seen other great edge rushers, outside linebackers, more so than, hand in the dirt type of defensive linemen who've been compared to Lawrence Taylor. The one that always comes to mind was Derek Thomas in Kansas City. He was kind of a reasonable facsimile of Lawrence Taylor, not as good. No one has been since Lawrence Taylor, but I think Micah Parsons has a chance to be as close to Lawrence Taylor as we've seen since Taylor retired nearly 30 years ago. And the thing that makes Micah Parsons so incredible, the size and speed and intellect out there on the football field, but also the fact that the guy can rush the passer, he can go sideline to sideline, and he can also drop into coverage. I mean, that's something Lawrence Taylor could do. And I think this is what makes him such a unique player and right now the best defensive player in football. As we said earlier, maybe the best player in football.
Yeah, and look, I'm not gonna argue that he might be the best player in football and certainly best defensive player right now. The Lawrence Taylor, that's a big thing because look, I mean, Lawrence Taylor is among the very few that get called universally the best defensive player of all time, not just at his position. So that's a very high statement. And look, I mean, you're right. The guy can do it all. I mean, he can cover. He can rush the quarterback. I mean, so I don't have an argument against that, John. To be honest with you,
I'm back.
Oh, did I lose you?
Hello?
Did I lose you there? Oh, looks like
Hello?
John, we there. We got you. Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like John got cut off. I'm going to try to get him back here in just a minute. Probably just a little issue with his reception, but no, to his point, there's no reason to think that Micah Parsons is not the best player, best defensive player in the NFL right now, and I can't necessarily make a good argument against that. And let's see, do we got John back?
I'm back.
All right, well, he's back. All right, we lost you for a minute.
A little bit of inclement weather in the area might have knocked me out.
See, and here I was just singing your praises for 3 straight minutes, and you didn't hear a minute of it. So that's a shame.
I'll listen to the playback.
Oh, I'm gonna cut it out. So,
sure,
we got to make up for time, So, anyway, so I will. My next overreaction, and we only have a few minutes here. My next overreaction. This is something I actually saw on Twitter, and it could be legit, and it's certainly a concern that we brought up in the off season, just based on his age and everything like that. But a Chiefs fan on Twitter made the statement that Travis Kelce looked kind of old out there on the football field, and to be honest with you, I'm not necessarily buying it 100% just because he is coming off of that injury, but also the fact that he suffered that injury was perhaps a factor of his age. But look, the guy is 34 years old. I mean, this is not something you can't expect him to maintain the same pace that he has. In reality over the last several years, and kind of like what we talk about when it comes to LeBron James in the NBA, it's like all these extra playoff games, they start to add up, and you factor in last season, John, where he was a huge target and really the primary focus of the offense outside of Patrick Mahomes. Well, yeah, maybe it is kind of the downward swing for Travis Kelce, which isn't terrible. It just means he's not going to be that big of a difference necessarily moving forward. Certainly not in the capacity it was last year. And maybe the Chiefs start to maybe not force feed him as much as they did last year. So, I'm not necessarily buying it 100%, but it's certainly plausible to think that, yeah, maybe you're going to start seeing some real signs of age from Travis Kelce. And we got John gone. Yes. No. Well, I guess. Okay. All right. I mean, I was like,
era.
Man, I was like,
my era. I know.
Oh,
my gut takes were never heard. But,
yeah.
In terms of Kelce, obviously 34, the injury, give him time to come back and be closer to 100% health, but also the fact that yesterday Mahomes threw 12 different targets, completed passes to 11 different players, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing. It's like he's trying to find out who can be there for him. I've got to believe the Chiefs at some point are going to go out and get a wide receiver for him. The name that pops up is Mike Evans, but now that Tampa Bay is 2-0, maybe they're not going to move on from him so quickly. But, someone along those lines that can come in and be one of his go-to guys at that point. But, yeah, I think that's what the Chiefs will probably look at closer to the trade deadline.
Well, the problem is, how are they going to pay him? I mean, they can't even afford to put Chris Jones on the franchise tag. I mean, this team had that's the thing. Like I could piggyback off that first point and say overreaction is that, like, despite moving to 1-1, this Chiefs offense is not as. I'm not going to say not as good, because that's foolish. I think this team has more issues than I think we anticipated. Like, I think we expected them to maybe take a little bit of a step back this year, considering the transitions they're doing offensively, Kelce getting a little bit older and then the injury. but there's we brought it up earlier, and I'm not saying like, oh, it wasn't the Chiefs win, it was the Jags loss. No, but the Jaguars really, really helped um, the Chiefs win that game by not helping themselves. I mean, the Jags made some really puzzling offensive play calls and really poor situations, and it just, I don't know, it was puzzling. It was like, man, why couldn't you coach like that in the Super Bowl, Doug Peterson? Like, why? But anyways, so considering the time, we'll have to cut the rest of our overreaction short, but that's our overreactions for week 2, and perhaps we'll add a couple more in tomorrow after Monday Night Football. So who do you got tonight, John? 2 games. Who are your 2 winners?
I expect both of these games to be close, within the division, maybe low-scoring games, but I like Carolina and Pittsburgh, both at home as underdogs, because I'm figuring that, I don't picture New Orleans and Cleveland getting off the 2-0 starts. Of course, I didn't think Washington would get off to a 2-0 start. That's how crazy the first 2 weeks have been. But I'll take the Steelers and the Panthers.
All right, I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you on that one. So,
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, I got to do it at some point. So, anyway, so that's gonna do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow, and again, we'll kind of wrap up the week a little bit more, and talk about Monday Night Football and kind of a lot of the things that we missed, because a lot of things happened this weekend, and we only have so much time to get to them all. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and be sure to find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, FPC Radio Live, and wherever you can find us, which is any of the Full Press websites, Full Press Coverage, Full Press Hockey. Check it out. We'll be there. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.